Incels refers to males only, is that correct? Well, that's the tragic irony of the whole thing. The term was originally coined by a progressive queer woman by the name of Alana, who set up a website and mailing list for involuntary celibates. It was shortened to incels, and later the V gets dropped to make it more pronounceable. And her original community was inclusive of all genders and all sexual orientations, and was meant to be a safe space, a refuge for those dealing with shyness specifically related to dating and relationships, which is reflected in Wikipedia's original definitions of incel from the 2000s, which is very different than the current definition, which describes them as a misogynistic hate group. So what went wrong? How do we get from there to where we are now? Well, even in those original Usenet groups and online communities, there were still involuntary celibate men who used their situation as an excuse to vocalize some extreme misogyny. Now, since those groups were moderated, a lot of that content was removed. The 2000s then see the rise of incel communities that not only do not moderate, but are actively run by these misogynistic men who encourage and incite this behavior. We also see women start to be blocked and banned from participating in these incel communities. And as the rhetoric in these communities starts to heat up, we then see incels openly showing support for misogynistic mass murderers of prior decades. The 2010s see not only the rise of fourth-wave feminism, but also a reactionary counter-movement in the manosphere, bringing with it a number of misogynistic websites dedicated to nothing more than simply opposing feminism. The US elects its first black president, accelerating the rise of the alt-right, and the fans of Mustache Guy start to come crawling out of the woodwork. And these three groups are all competing for the same audience: disaffected young men who idolize violence. These three groups then get connected into a pipeline of ever-increasing misogyny and hatred, which is why the 2010s also saw Gamergate, multiple mass murders committed by those dedicated to the incel cause, and Reddit finally saying enough is enough and banning their incel community. In 2018, Alana sets up another website, once again trying to create a community of positive support for involuntary celibates. Unfortunately, other commitments in her life caused her to close that down within 2 years. Which brings us to today, where these groups continue to fester and incite violence against women, as well as idolize misogynistic killers. Meanwhile, a term femcel was invented for female involuntary celibates in order to distance themselves from incels and the misogyny and hatred that they get from their male counterparts. Many social media platforms, in particular Discord, are doing a very poor job of finding, locating, and shutting down these hate groups. But on a positive note, in case you're wondering, Alana did overcome her shyness and begin to date successfully. One can only hope that these men figure it out someday too.